He abandoned his pregnant wife for a mistress, believing he had freed himself from the burdens of commitment. But fate had a price, and it was merciless. The twist is astonishing. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more gripping stories like this one. And don't forget to like the video to keep watching. The night was cold and eerily silent. Outside, the wind howled through the empty streets, sending dry leaves skittering across the damp asphalt. Inside a small apartment, Aurora felt an entirely different kind of chill, a crushing anguish that wrapped around her like an iron grip. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, her eyes darting over the words on the screen as if willing them to change. Message from James. This isn't working anymore. I found someone who makes me happy. I'm leaving. Good luck with the baby. Her heart seemed to stop, a sharp gasp caught in her throat. This couldn't be real, not now, not when she was 8 months pregnant. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible, drowned by the rising tide of panic crashing through her. Tears spilled down her cheeks before her mind had fully processed the words. James, the man she had built a life with, the father of her child, had walked away, discarding their love as if it were nothing more than a contract he could tear apart. She pressed her back against the wall, trying to hold back the sobs, but her body refused to obey. Then a sharp pain tore through her abdomen. She gasped, gripping her belly, willing herself to stay calm. But how could she? Her world was unraveling. Across town, James, now Leo, sped through the darkened streets in his sleek sports car, the city lights flashing past like fleeting promises. In the passenger seat, Evelyn leaned back with a satisfied smile. You made the right choice, love. You're finally free from that prison, she murmured, her fingers brushing against his arm. Leo laughed, exhaling in relief. Yes, he had made the right decision. Aurora had been sweet, but predictable. Evelyn? No. Lily was a storm he could never tame, a whirlwind of excitement and chaos. This was the life he wanted. One without obligations, without chains. But fate is not so easily defied. In the days that followed, Aurora tried to piece together the remnants of her shattered world. She cried into the silence of the night, cradling her belly, feeling the gentle movements of her unborn son as if he too sensed the sudden absence. But she didn't have the luxury of breaking down. She had to be strong. Then, one night, as she shifted in bed, a searing pain ripped through her body. A scream tore from her lips as she clutched her stomach. No, not now. It was too soon. But her body had already made its decision. Desperation clawed at her as she fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed. Hello, came the familiar voice of her best friend, Sarah. Aurora's breath came in ragged gasps. I need help, the baby is coming. Celeste arrived within minutes, her face etched with worry as she helped Aurora into the car. The hospital was only a few blocks away, but every second stretched unbearably, each jolt of the vehicle amplifying Aurora's pain. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her fingers digging into the seat as she fought against the waves of agony crashing through her. The pain was unbearable. The fear was worse. By the time they reached the hospital, Aurora was barely holding on. Nurses rushed her into the delivery room, their movements swift and precise. The doctor exchanged a tense glance with the nurse. This was too soon. There could be complications. Hours passed in a blur of pain, exhaustion, and fear. Then, at last, a fragile cry pierced the silence. Tears streamed down Aurora's face as she cradled her newborn son. He was so small, so delicate, but he was here, alive, fighting, just like her. She pressed her lips to his tiny forehead, overwhelmed by the fierce love surging through her. Meanwhile, across town, Leo reveled in his newfound freedom. Candlelit dinners at high-end restaurants, spontaneous weekend getaways, laughter over expensive wine. Lily by his side, always exhilarating, always unpredictable. Aurora had become nothing more than a distant memory, a chapter he had closed without a second thought. But life has a cruel way of making us remember the things we try to forget. And Leo would soon learn that some choices come with consequences far beyond his imagination. Back at the hospital, Aurora watched little Jasper sleep in the transparent crib beside her bed. His tiny chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, his delicate eyelids fluttering as if he were lost in dreams of a gentler world. He looked so vulnerable, so impossibly small, and yet his mere existence was proof of his resilience. Aurora wanted to be strong for him, but inside she was shattered. The man she had loved, the man who had once sworn to be by her side, had abandoned her at the moment she needed him most. The memories clung to her like ghosts, Leo's hands resting on her belly at their first ultrasound, the way his eyes had sparkled with joy when they learned they were having a boy, the whispered promises of a future together. Now, those moments felt like illusions, distant echoes of a love that had never truly existed. Because in the end he had walked away without a single glance back. The door creaked open, pulling Aurora from her thoughts. Celeste stepped inside carrying a tray of hot soup, her expression filled with quiet concern. "You need to eat," she said gently, setting the tray on the bedside table. "You can't afford to weaken yourself." Aurora forced a small smile, but when she brought the spoon to her lips, the food tasted like nothing. "I just don't understand," she murmured, staring down at the untouched bowl. "How can someone do that? Just erase an entire life and move on as if it never meant anything?" Celeste sighed, pulling up a chair beside her. "People like Leo only see what they want to see in the moment," she said softly. "Right now, he believes he made the right choice. But Aurora, life has a way of settling its debts. It always does." Aurora glanced at Jasper, brushing a gentle finger over his impossibly tiny hand. "I just want to be enough for him." Celeste reached for her hand, squeezing it with quiet reassurance. "And you will be," she promised. "But you have to take care of yourself too." Aurora knew Celeste was right. She had to move forward. But how do you start over when everything you once knew has crumbled? Meanwhile, across town, Leo was indulging in his new life with Lily. They sat in an opulent restaurant, the kind of place he had never taken Aurora. She had always preferred quiet cafes, home-cooked meals. Too simple, too homely. But Lily was different. She thrived on extravagance, exuding an effortless confidence that made him feel powerful, unstoppable. "You're awfully quiet, darling," Lily murmured, crossing her legs as she twirled the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. Her gaze flickered over him, sharp and assessing. "Thinking about something?" Leo forced a smile. "Just tired. Work's been demanding." Lily leaned forward slightly, her lips curving into an amused smirk. "Well, I certainly hope it's not that old story weighing on your mind." She let out a soft, dismissive laugh. "You made the right choice, Leo. Now you can finally live without that prison." Prison. That's how she saw Aurora, as if the woman who had stood by his side for years, who had loved him unconditionally, carried his child, had been nothing more than a chain around his neck. Leo exhaled, pushing aside the fleeting pang of guilt. He was free now. This was the life he had chosen, the life he deserved. Or so he thought. That night, as Lily slept soundly beside him, Leo reached for his phone, scrolling through his notifications out of habit. His thumb hovered over an unexpected email, one from the legal team at his former company. His stomach tightened as he read the first few lines. The merger he had been banking on, the deal that had taken months of careful negotiations, had fallen apart. Without this agreement, his position in the company was unstable. And then, the part that made his blood run cold. One of the key investors had abruptly withdrawn his support. The reason? Concerns regarding James' dubious personal reputation. A knot formed in Leo's throat. Dubious reputation. It hit him then. His decision to abandon Aurora, a pregnant woman, had not gone unnoticed. It was circulating. People were talking, whispering. Some disapproved. And in his world, perception was everything. Deals weren't made on skill alone. They were built on trust, reputation, respect. And his was beginning to crumble. What he didn't yet realize was just how far-reaching the damage would be. The doctors reassured Aurora that Jasper was fighting, that he was stronger than he looked, but every beep from the machines, every fragile rise and fall of his tiny chest, reminded her just how delicate his life still was. She spent her nights by the incubator, her fingers curled around his impossibly small hand, singing to him in a hushed, trembling voice. "You'll be all right, my love. Mommy's here." Even though exhaustion weighed down on her, she refused to leave his side. She had to be strong. She had no choice, even if, inside, she felt like she was unraveling. On the third night, as she tried to doze off in the stiff hospital chair, muffled voices drifted in from the hallway. Nurses whispering, "You hear about him, the baby's father?" Yeah, they say he left his pregnant wife for another woman. The kind of man does that. The kind who one day learns that life turns around. Aurora clenched her eyes shut, willing herself to ignore them. But the words sliced through her like glass. Her pain was no longer just her own. It was public. People were talking, judging, whispering her story like it was some tragic tale to be passed around. But if Leo thought this was the end of it, he was wrong. Fate wasn't finished with him yet. A few days later, Leo's phone buzzed with an unexpected call. An old friend. "Dude, what did you do?" Leo frowned, already irritated. "What are you talking about?" "Your ex, her story blew up, man. It's everywhere. An abandoned pregnant woman raising her kid alone while the father runs off with someone else. The press is eating it up. People are ripping you apart online." Leo felt his stomach drop. That couldn't be right. His fingers moved fast, pulling up social media, and then he saw it. His name plastered across every platform. Feminist activists condemning him, business leaders calling him a disgrace, comment after comment, the outrage growing like wildfire. Coward. Anyone who abandons a pregnant woman deserves to lose everything. This guy will pay. Leo tried to breathe, but it felt like the walls were closing in. Then his phone rang again. This time it was his boss. "James, we need to talk now." Jasper was still fighting for his life in the hospital. Aurora was still learning what it meant to be a mother, alone. But James. Leo was about to learn the hard way that some choices can dismantle everything a man has built. And this was only the beginning. Leo's palms were slick with sweat as he stepped into his boss's office. The air, usually crisp and controlled, felt suffocating now. The company had always prided itself on order, on precision, but today the walls seemed to close in around him. This wasn't going to be just any conversation. Richard, his superior, sat behind his massive desk, his gaze sharp, unreadable. The silence in the room crackled with tension. "Sit down, James." Leo obeyed, forcing himself to maintain an air of calm, though his pulse thundered in his ears. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused?" He drew in a breath, trying to piece together a defense, something logical, something that would make Richard see reason. But before he could utter a word, his boss raised a hand, cutting him off. "Your personal life shouldn't be the company's problem, but when your image starts affecting our business, it becomes our problem. Investors are pulling back. Your actions have stained our reputation. Do you have any idea what that means?" Leo's stomach clenched. "Richard, I can fix this. I didn't think my personal life would have this kind of impact." Richard's gaze hardened. He studied Leo for a long moment before letting out a slow, exasperated sigh. "That's the problem, James. You didn't think. And now? It's too late. You're out." The words landed like a gut punch. "Fired." Leo's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He had poured years into this company, proven himself time and time again. He was one of the best. How could they just discard him? "Richard, give me a chance. I can turn this around." "The decision has already been made." Richard's tone was final. "Gather your things and leave." Leo felt the floor beneath him shift. He walked out of the office in silence, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on him. But the moment he reached his car, the rage exploded. With a furious growl, he slammed his fist against the steering wheel. Everything was crumbling, his career, his image, his reputation. He needed a way out. Fast. When Leo arrived at the apartment he shared with Lily, he found her sprawled across the sofa, lazily scrolling through her phone. As soon as he stepped inside, she barely glanced up, her expression indifferent. "Have you seen this? We're all over the gossip sites." Leo shrugged off his jacket, his jaw tight, his patience hanging by a thread. "Yeah, I saw it." Evelyn rolled her eyes dramatically. "This is a disaster. It's ruining my image too. I'm an influencer, James. I can't be linked to a scandal like this." His frown deepened. That kind of scandal. She sighed, as if she were the one suffering. The whole, poor, abandoned pregnant woman, and the heartless man who ran off with his mistress narratives. You know how the internet works. People love a villain. And right now, that's me. Leo ran a hand over his face, exhaustion pressing down on him. I just lost my job, Lily. I need to fix this. She folded her arms across her chest. Maybe it's best if we lay low for a while. Separate ourselves from all this drama. He let out a hollow laugh. You're breaking up with me. Lily shrugged, her expression unreadable. I don't want to be dragged down with you. His stomach twisted. You convinced me to leave everything behind. You told me it was the right choice. And it was, for me, she said easily. Then with a nonchalant flick of her wrist, she added, but now, it doesn't suit me anymore. Leo stared at her, disbelief coursing through him. The woman who had once whispered about adventure and passion, who had been so eager to pull him into a new life, was now tossing him aside like yesterday's news. You're just like everyone else, he muttered. Lily let out a soft laugh, unbothered. Welcome to the real world, James. He turned and walked out without another word. The cold night air hit him like a slap. His head pounded. His life was in ruins. No job, no money, nowhere to go. And what was worse, for the first time he missed Aurora. Aurora, the woman who had always been there for him. The woman who would have held his hand through the worst of times. The woman who was now alone, caring for their son, Noah. The thought of the baby made something shift inside him. For so long he had pushed the thought away, ignored the existence of the child he had so carelessly abandoned. But now, with no one, with nothing, he felt a hollow emptiness gnawing at him. One he could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, Aurora was facing battles of her own. Jasper had finally been released from the ICU, but he still required constant care. His tiny body was fragile, his breaths soft and uncertain. Aurora spent her nights awake, cradling him against her chest, humming lullabies, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Everything will be all right, my love. But the truth was, nothing was all right. The bills were piling up, the money was running out. Even with Sarah's unwavering support, reality loomed over her like a storm cloud. She needed a job, but who would hire a single mother with a newborn? That morning, as she fed Noah, her phone buzzed with an unexpected call. Mrs. Miller, this is Elizabeth Carter from the Heart and Hope Foundation. Aurora straightened, instantly recognizing the name. The foundation was known for helping single mothers and struggling families. We've heard about your story, Elizabeth continued. Many people were deeply moved, and they want to help. We'd love to speak with you. Aurora blinked in surprise. Talk? About what? About an opportunity. James, on the other hand, was beginning to understand the weight of his choices. After being turned away from job interview after job interview, the reality set in. His name was tainted. He was no longer a respected executive. He was that man, the one who abandoned his pregnant wife. The stigma clung to him like a shadow. Employers didn't want the controversy. No one wanted to be associated with a man whose name had been dragged through the mud. And after yet another rejection, the truth crashed over him like a wave. His past had burned every bridge. He had lost everything. And now he had no choice. He had to start over. And for the first time since he left, he knew exactly where he needed to go. That night, when Aurora opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Leo stood on the other side. He looked different. The confident man she once knew was gone. His frame was thinner, his face etched with exhaustion. But it wasn't just his appearance that unsettled her. It was the look in his eyes, a look she hadn't seen in a long time. Regret? What are you doing here? He exhaled, his hands clenched at his sides as if steadying himself. I need to talk to you. Aurora's throat tightened. She should slam the door in his face. She should tell him to leave, that there was nothing left to say. But a part of her, one she wished she could silence, needed to hear his words. And deep down, she knew this conversation would change everything. Aurora's chest felt heavy as she stared at Leo in the doorway. Time had not been kind to him. His sharp features were worn, shadows darkened his eyes, and his usual air of arrogance had been stripped away. but none of that changed what he had done. Nothing could. Jasper stirred in her arms, letting out a soft, sleepy sound, and for the first time, Aurora saw Leo's gaze shift, not to her, but to the child he had walked away from. For the first time, he truly saw the son he had abandoned. "What do you want, James?" Her voice was cold, steady, but inside, a storm raged. He had once been her world, the man she had imagined forever with, the man she had trusted with her heart, her future. And now he was just a stranger. Leo swallowed hard. And then, finally, he spoke. "Can I come in?" Aurora hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door in his face, to shut him out the way he had shut her out. But beneath the anger, beneath the pain, there was a bitter curiosity she couldn't ignore. With a quiet exhale, she stepped aside, opening the door just enough for him to enter. Leo walked in slowly, his movements hesitant, as if stepping into a life he no longer recognized. The small apartment was neat, but exhaustion lingered in every corner. Stacks of diapers, baby bottles in the sink, a simple crib tucked against the wall. Signs of struggle, signs of survival. Aurora was doing it all alone. His gaze shifted back to Jasper, and something inside him twisted painfully. For so long, he had avoided thinking about his son, about what it meant to be a father. But now, standing here, seeing Noah, so impossibly small, so vulnerable, he felt the weight of it all in a way he never had before. Is he all right? Aurora let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it, only bitterness. "Now you care? After months of silence? After walking away like we were nothing?" Leo shut his eyes for a moment, shame pressing down on him. "I know I made a mistake, Aurora." Her voice rose, filled with the raw hurt she had buried for too long. "A mistake? No, James. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is losing your keys. What you did?" She sucked in a breath, her hands clenching into fists. "You destroyed me. You left me alone at the worst moment of my life." He lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes, because she was right. "Why are you here, James?" Her voice was quieter now, but no less sharp. "What do you really want?" He swallowed hard, forcing himself to look at her. "I've lost everything, my job, my reputation. Evelyn left me. I have nothing left." Aurora crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "So that's why you're here? Because you have nowhere else to go?" "No." He stepped closer, desperation creeping into his voice. "I came back because I finally see what I did. I was a fool. I thought I was freeing myself, but all I did was destroy the only things that ever really mattered." Aurora felt her chest tighten, her eyes burning, but she blinked quickly. She would not cry, not in front of him. Not for him. "I don't know what you expect from me." Aurora's voice was steady, but her heart was anything but. Forgiveness? A second chance? Leo's gaze drifted to Jasper, his expression unreadable. I just want to meet my son." The words hit her like a physical blow. For months, she had braced herself for the reality that Leo would never be a part of Noah's life. She had told herself that he didn't care, that he had moved on without a second thought. She never imagined he would want this. "Life isn't that simple," she whispered. "You can't just come and go as you please." "I know that," he said softly, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Aurora wanted to believe him. She wanted to think that maybe he had changed. But could she ever truly trust someone who had abandoned her when she needed him the most? Before she could respond, a faint cry filled the apartment. Jasper stirred in her arms, letting out a restless whimper. Instinct took over, and Aurora cradled him close, gently rocking him. And then, Leo took a hesitant step forward. Can I hold him?" Aurora froze. The thought of letting him hold Jasper terrified her. He didn't deserve that. But at the same time, a part of her, a small, uncertain part, wanted to see what would happen. Her hands trembled as she moved closer. Slowly, reluctantly, she placed Jasper into Leo's arms. Leo held his son for the first time. And in that instant, something inside him broke. Jasper was so small, so light in his arms, as if he weighed nothing at all. His tiny fingers twitched against the fabric of Leo's shirt, his soft breaths barely audible. His sleepy eyes fluttered, too tired to fully open. Leo felt a lump rise in his throat. How had he walked away from this? How had he turned his back on his own son? Aurora watched in silence, studying every flicker of emotion that crossed his face. And then something unexpected happened. A single tear slid down Leo's cheek. Leo, the man who had always prided himself on being in control, on never showing weakness, was crying. And Aurora didn't know what to do with that. Aurora looked away. She didn't want to feel anything for him. She didn't want to believe his words. But seeing him there, holding their son, tears slipping down his face, made something inside her fracture. Leo lifted his gaze to hers, his voice raw, breaking. "I know I don't deserve anything." He swallowed hard. "But I want to be a father to him." Aurora wanted to believe that, she wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, people could change. But could he? Could she ever trust him again? Before she could answer, a sudden, sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Aurora frowned. Who would be at her door this late? A chill ran through her as she stepped toward it. Slowly, she turned the handle and pulled the door open. Her blood ran cold. Standing in front of her was Lily, and she wasn't alone. Behind her, two men in dark suits loomed, their expressions unreadable. Aurora's stomach twisted. Evelyn smirked, tilting her head slightly, her eyes gleaming with something cruel. "We need to talk." Aurora's entire body went rigid. Lily's smile was cold, calculated, but what truly unsettled her were the men standing at her sides. They weren't just bystanders, they weren't just escorts. Something was wrong. A shiver crawled up Aurora's spine. Leo, who had been frozen in place, finally moved. His grip on Jasper tightened ever so slightly, his face losing all color as his gaze locked onto Lily. It was as if he were staring at a ghost he had prayed never to see again. When he spoke, his voice was tight, strained, edged with something close to fear. "What are you doing here?" Lily crossed her arms, her smirk deepening. Her eyes burned with a satisfaction that made Aurora's skin crawl. And in that moment, Aurora knew. This wasn't just about James. It was about her, too. And whatever Lily wanted, it wouldn't end well. "Did you really think you could just disappear and everything would be fine?" Evelyn's voice dripped with amusement, her smirk unwavering. "Oh, James, you're so naive." Aurora's eyes darted between them, trying to piece together what was happening. Then Evelyn stepped forward, holding out a brown envelope. Leo stiffened. "You have until the end of the week to sort this out," Evelyn said coolly. Then, her gaze shifted, landed on Jasper, nestled in Aurora's arms. Her smile sharpened. "Otherwise, well, I suppose you wouldn't want anyone else getting caught up in this mess, would you?" Aurora's pulse spiked. "What does this mean?" she demanded, her grip on Jasper tightening. Leo's hands trembled as he took the envelope, his fingers unsteady as he tore it open. His eyes scanned the pages inside, flipping through them quickly. His face went white. His breath hitched. His jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. Lily, this has to be a joke." Evelyn let out a soft, mocking laugh, running a hand through her sleek hair. "Darling, I never joke about money." Aurora couldn't stand the tension any longer. "Can someone explain to me what the hell is going on?" Leo let out a ragged breath, dragging a hand down his face, his frustration clear. These are documents for a contract I never signed." Aurora felt her stomach sink. Evelyn tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, but you did, love, with your fingerprint and everything." Aurora's throat tightened. "Leo, have you been involved in something illegal?" He looked up at her then, and for the first time she saw something she had never seen in his eyes before. Real, raw fear. I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if these documents are real, I'm up to my neck in it." Evelyn chuckled, utterly unfazed. "You've always been careless, haven't you?" she mused. "Always trusted the wrong people, including me." The air in the room grew suffocating. Aurora's grip on Jasper tightened as a protective instinct flared inside her. "I want you out of my house. Now." Her voice was sharp, unyielding. Evelyn sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes. "As you wish." But before she turned to leave, she leaned in just enough for her words to slither into the space between them. "Tick-tock, James, the clock is running out." And with that, she strode out the door, the two men following close behind. Aurora barely had time to catch her breath before she turned back to Leo. "Tell me everything. Now?" "Of course, darling, but don't worry," Evelyn cooed, her smirk never faltering. "I'm sure Leo will sort everything out soon. After all, he has a lot to lose." Her gaze flickered to Jasper one last time before she turned, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she walked out. The two men in suits followed close behind, their silence far more unsettling than any words. The moment the door shut behind them, Aurora spun toward Leo, fury flashing in her eyes. "What have you done?" Leo let out a shaky breath, dragging his hands through his hair, his frustration palpable. "I don't know, Aurora." His voice was raw, his face tight with regret. I was blind. I thought Evelyn was everything I wanted, that I was living the perfect life. But now it's all falling apart." Aurora felt a bitter taste rise in her throat. "You've ruined your life." Her voice was sharp, unrelenting. "And now what? Do you expect me to fix it for you?" Leo shook his head immediately, his eyes glistening with anguish. "No. I don't want to drag you into this. I just wanted to put things right. I wanted to at least try to be a father to Noah." Aurora's breath hitched. Those words. For so long she had wanted him to say them, to mean them. But Leo had made so many wrong choices, had burned so many bridges, that trusting him now felt impossible. "You can't just show up and expect me to forget everything." Her grip on Jasper tightened. "If you want to be a father, prove it. But I'm not going to put my son at risk for you." Leo swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I understand." Aurora wasn't sure if she believed him. The next few days were tense. Aurora tried to focus on her routine, caring for Jasper, keeping up with bills, ignoring the lingering weight of Lily's visit. But no matter how hard she tried to push it away, a gnawing feeling settled in her gut. It wasn't over. Leo was different. She could see it. He called every day to check on Noah. He showed up with groceries, diapers, tiny clothes that Jasper would soon grow into. And Aurora, despite herself, began to wonder. Rebuck just maybe, could he really change? He didn't ask for anything in return. He just did. But was that enough? Meanwhile, something began to shift for Aurora. After her story went viral, an unexpected invitation arrived. A request for a TV interview. A chance to tell her side of the story. A platform to inspire other single mothers. And maybe, just maybe, a way to secure a better future. The night before the interview, she sat by Jasper's crib, watching his tiny chest rise and fall in steady rhythm. Doubt gnawed at her. Was she doing the right thing? But then, she remembered. The abandonment, the sleepless nights, the terror of wondering if she could give her son the life he deserved. She was done being the woman left behind. The next day, under the bright studio lights, Aurora took a steadying breath and began to speak. The response was overwhelming. The audience listened. They felt her pain, her strength, her resilience. People reached out. Companies offered opportunities. For the first time in a long time, she felt like life was changing, like she was finally stepping into a new chapter. One where she was no longer defined by what had been done to her, but by what she was building for herself. But peace never lasted long. That night, as she rocked Jasper to sleep, the phone rang. "Rio," and she picked it up. "Aurora." The voice on the other end was weak, barely more than a whisper. Her stomach clenched. "James?" A short silence, and then, "I need help." And then, the line went dead. Aura's heart pounded. James's voice had been so faint, so weak. The call had dropped, leaving only silence and a tightening knot in her throat. Her first instinct was to ignore him. After everything he had done, the abandonment, the lies, the wreckage she was still piecing together, why should she care? Why should she run to the man who had left her to struggle alone? But something inside her wouldn't let her stand still. There had been something in his voice, not arrogance, not excuses, desperation. A fragility she had never heard before. Her fingers trembled as she redialed his number, voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. Aurora looked at Noah, sleeping peacefully in his crib, oblivious to the chaos life seemed determined to throw at them. She exhaled sharply, grabbed her car keys and dialed Sarah. "I need a favor." Celeste arrived quickly, concern evident in her eyes. Aurora wasted no time, explaining everything in a few short sentences. Celeste frowned. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Aurora wasn't sure about anything. "I just need to see if he's okay." She swallowed hard. Then I'll figure out what to do." The night was cold as Aurora drove through the city's dimly lit streets. Her hands gripped the wheel, her pulse racing. She had no idea what she was about to walk into, but something told her this was just the beginning. Her heart pounded, a deep, insistent rhythm, warning her something was about to change tonight. After countless failed attempts to reach James, an unshakable instinct led her to a rundown hotel near the city center. It was the kind of place people disappeared into, the kind of place where desperation settled in the air like dust. Aurora approached the front desk, her voice firm but laced with urgency. "James Miller, what room is he in?" The receptionist eyed her warily. For a moment she thought he might refuse. Then, after taking in the concern etched across her face, he exhaled and muttered, "Room 207. Aurora didn't waste another second. She sprinted up the stairs, her pulse roaring in her ears. When she reached the door, she knocked firmly. No answer. She tried again, harder this time. "James?" Silence. A gnawing fear twisted inside her. What if something had happened? Her breath caught as she reached for the handle. It turned easily beneath her grip. The door was unlocked. A lump formed in her throat as she slowly pushed it open and stepped inside. The sight before her made her breath hitch. Leo sat on the floor, his back against the wall. His eyes were vacant, staring at nothing. His hands were buried in his hair, his fingers tangled in disheveled strands. Crumpled papers littered the carpet around him, discarded, meaningless. The dim, flickering light cast harsh shadows over his face, making the hollowness in his expression even more stark. He looked wrecked in a way she had never seen before. Then, as if sensing her presence, he slowly lifted his gaze. His eyes met hers. "You came." His voice was barely more than a whisper. Aurora swallowed, shutting the door behind her with a quiet click. He forced herself to steady her breath, to keep her heart from betraying her. "What happened, James?" Because whatever had brought him to this moment, it was bigger than her, bigger than him, and somehow she knew. This was only the beginning. "What's going on, James?" Leo let out a heavy sigh, dragging his hands over his face, as if trying to wipe away the weight of everything that had collapsed around him. "I've lost everything, Aurora. Not just my job, not just the money." His voice cracked slightly. "I lost who I was, and now I don't even know who I am anymore." A long, suffocating silence settled between them. Aurora inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "You called me because you needed help, so tell me, what do you want?" Leo let out a quiet laugh, flat, hollow, devoid of humor. "I wanted to go back in time, to undo everything, to do it right this time." Aurora's chest tightened. For months, she had imagined this moment. For months, she had dreamed of hearing these words from him. But now that she was standing here, now that he was saying them, she wasn't sure if it even mattered anymore. "Time doesn't go back, James." Her voice was steady, cool, unreadable. "You left me. You left me when I needed you most." His eyes squeezed shut, as if her words physically hurt. "I know that." Aurora exhaled sharply. "Then why am I here?" Leo looked up, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Vulnerability, because despite everything, you're still the only person in the world who would care. Aurora looked away. She didn't want to feel sorry for him. And What are you going to do now? Silence, then finally his answer. Soft, uncertain, I don't know. Aurora crossed her arms, leveling him with a gaze that held no room for self-pity. Well, I know what you're not going to do. Leo swallowed, waiting. Her voice was firm. You're not going to give up. Leo stared at her, eyes wide with surprise. What? Aurora took a step forward, her voice unwavering. You may have made horrible choices, James, but running away from them won't fix anything. You say you've lost everything, but you still have a chance to be someone better. Leo let out a soft, breathless laugh. Aurora's fists clenched at her sides. What does she want? Leo hesitated before answering, as if the words themselves left a bitter taste in his mouth. Money. Power. He exhaled sharply. She doesn't just want to ruin you. She wants something in return to leave you alone. Aurora let out a harsh, humorless laugh. That's blackmail. Exactly. She inhaled deeply, trying to push back the crushing weight settling on her shoulders. She wanted to believe she was strong enough to ignore Lily, to brush off her lies. But she wasn't naive. Evelyn started spreading false stories it would reach people. It could damage her credibility, her job opportunity, her future with Noah. This wasn't just about her anymore. He couldn't afford to let it happen. Why are you telling me this? Aurora asked, her voice sharp, suspicious. Leo met her gaze without flinching. Because I'm not going to let it happen. Aurora blinked, caught off guard by the certainty in his tone. And how exactly do you plan to stop it? A beat of silence. Leo's jaw tightened. I'll handle it. Aurora's eyes narrowed. You don't just handle someone like Evelyn, James. Watch me. For the first time, Aurora wasn't sure whether she should be worried or relieved. Leo swallowed hard. I have a plan, but I need your help. A chill ran down Aurora's spine. James, trust me. Aurora let out a sharp, bitter laugh. After everything, do you really expect me to trust you? Leo sighed, running a hand through his hair, frustration flickering across his face. I know I don't deserve it, but this time, I'm trying to do the right thing. Aurora studied him for a long, tense moment. He looked different. Not the arrogant man who had walked away, not the selfish, impulsive person she had once loved. But was that enough? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. If I were you, I'd think long and hard before continuing with this. People don't like liars. Nor mothers who used their children to promote themselves. See you soon. The air in the room grew heavy. Aurora's stomach twisted as she stared at the screen. Was that Lily? Before she could react, Leo took the phone from her hand and read the message. His expression darkened, his jaw tightening. Yes. A slow, burning anger ignited in Aurora's chest. She had spent months fighting to rebuild her life. She had endured the whispers, the doubts, the shame of being abandoned. And now? After everything? Lily still wanted to tear her down? It's over. Her voice was quiet but laced with steel. I'm not going to stand by and let her destroy my life. Leo met her gaze, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded. Then let's end this. His voice was firm. Together. Aurora never thought she would say it, but for the first time, she and Leo were on the same side. And Evelyn had no idea what was coming. Aurora could feel the blood pulsing in her ears as she stared at the message on her phone. It was as if everything she had endured, the sleepless nights, the abandonment, the whispered doubts, had led to this moment. Evelyn had crossed a line, one that Aurora could not ignore. Across from her, Leo looked just as tense. His jaw was set, his eyes locked on the screen, his fingers curled into fists against the coffee table. The silence between them was thick, dense with unspoken thoughts. This has to stop, Aurora finally said, her voice quiet but unwavering. Leo looked up, his expression grim. I know, and I know how to do it. Aurora crossed her arms, waiting. Evelyn only has power over you because she has influence, connections that keep her untouchable. But what if we take that away from her? Aurora arched a skeptical brow. And how exactly do we do that? Leo slid his phone across the table. He hesitated before picking it up. On the screen was an email. The subject line alone sent a chill through her. Her eyes scanned the contents, the weight of it sinking in. "What is this?" she asked, though deep down she already knew. Leo exhaled sharply. Proof. His voice was edged with something dark. Determination. Desperation. Evelyn forged contracts. She used my name in financial transactions I never authorized. This is enough to bury her. Aurora's stomach tightened. And you haven't taken this to the police because... Leo's jaw tensed. Because if I go alone, they might not believe me. I was involved with her for too long. But if you validate this, if you back me up, it won't just be my word against hers. Aurora frowned, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. And why would I do that? Leo met her gaze head on. Because if Evelyn falls, she won't be able to threaten you anymore. Aurora's fingers tightened around the phone. He was big. He was dangerous. But maybe, just maybe, this was the only way to end Evelyn's hold on her forever. Aurora picked up her phone and began typing rapidly. Leo frowned. "What are you doing?" "Calling Sebastian Hamilton," she said, not looking up. "If there's anyone who can expose Evelyn publicly, it's him." Leo looked momentarily stunned but didn't argue. He just watched as Aurora arranged a meeting with the businessman for that very afternoon. Hours later, Aurora and Leo sat across from Sebastian in his imposing office. The businessman regarded them carefully, his fingers interlocked on the dark wooden desk, his sharp eyes flicking between them. "Are you telling me that Evelyn not only wants to destroy Aurora's reputation, but has also committed financial crimes?" Leo nodded, his expression firm. "Yes, and here's the proof." He handed over the documents and emails he had compiled. As Sebastian took them, scanning through each page in silence. The weight of his scrutiny filled the room. Flippantly, he exhaled, his expression unreadable. "This is very serious. If this evidence holds up, Evelyn could face criminal charges." Aurora held her breath. "Can you help us?" Sebastian leaned back, his lips curving slightly. "I didn't get where I am by ignoring injustices," he said smoothly. "Let's do this the right way." The next morning, Evelyn's name exploded across the headlines. The exposure was merciless. Not only were her financial crimes laid bare, but so was her long history of manipulation and deceit. Companies she had worked with began severing ties, issuing statements distancing themselves from her. Her once polished reputation plummeted. And then came the final blow. Leo formally denounced her. The police launched an investigation, and within days, Evelyn's world came crashing down. Evelyn became the center of a scandal. Every headline bore her name. Every news outlet dissected her downfall. Aurora felt a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying finally lift off her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she could breathe. But what now? Leo had proven that he was willing to change, but was that enough? That night, as she was tidying up the apartment, there was a quiet knock at the door. She knew who it was before she even opened it. Leo stood there, hands in his pockets, his eyes softer than she ever remembered. "Can I come in?" Aurora hesitated. For so long, she had been protecting herself, rebuilding her life, learning how to stand on her own. Letting him in felt like opening a door she wasn't sure she was ready to walk through. But eventually, she nodded. Leo stepped inside, his gaze instantly falling on Noah, sleeping peacefully in his crib. "He's growing up so fast." Aurora smiled slightly. "Yes, he is." Leo inhaled deeply, gathering his words before finally speaking. "I know I did everything wrong, Aurora. I know I hurt you in ways I can never take back. But I've never been more honest than I am right now." He turned to face her fully. "I want to be in my son's life. I want to be better. And then..." His voice dropped lower. "And you?" Aurora's breath hitched. "I want you back." Her heart pounded. She had spent so long building herself without him. So long trying to erase the pain, the betrayal. But deep down, a small, fragile part of her still wanted to believe him. Leo carefully reached for her hand, his touch hesitant, unsure. "I don't expect you to forgive me now, but let me prove that I can be the man you and Noah deserve." Aurora looked at him for a long moment, searching for a moment if she could take that risk again. Then, a slow, quiet smile crossed her lips. But just maybe, some stories weren't meant to end. Let's see how far you get. The journey wasn't over. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild, and a past that wouldn't simply disappear overnight. But for the first time, a new beginning felt possible. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Did you enjoy this story? If so, drop a like and leave a kind comment to encourage us. Your support means the world. And don't forget, we love you.